All right, guys, let's get going. Hopefully, you got some good gratitudes and intentions there. If you want to share them in the chat box, would be awesome. Love to always see that every day. Also, if you've had some wins or successes that have taken place that we can celebrate with you, would love to see that in there as well. All right. Well, here's what I want to talk about with you guys today. Is I want to start by just here's the thought for you: is your competition is getting better by the day. Your competition is getting better by the day. Now, what are they getting better at? Unfortunately, here, and this is frustrating to me, but here's what I am noticing that the competition is getting better at. They're getting better at cutting their commissions. They're getting better at cutting your commissions. And when I say that, meaning if you're working with buyers and you go on the MLS, I cannot believe how many listings the range of what that BAC looks like. Like, I have been doing this for 25 years, and during that time, it has not been until just the last couple years that I have noticed how much agents are cutting their commissions and cutting your commissions now as well. For years, agents would go out and cut commissions, but they were still putting it on the MLS, typically with a 3% BAC. But today, you're seeing it where now not only are they going out and cutting their commission, they're cutting your commissions. The other things that your competition is getting better at is promising things to the sellers that they have no intentions of doing. See, they're getting better at figuring out ways. Listings are in such high demand today that the competition is getting better and better at trying to cut into the way the business should be done. The other thing that I am seeing as well, which interestingly enough, though, this piece of it, the market is taking care of themselves, but agents are getting better and better at just going in and saying, hey, any price you want to sell for, we can sell it for that price. They will promise anything they need to. Well, that's what the competition is doing. So now here's the question for you. Why do they do that? Why do they go out and cut their commissions? Why do they overprice their listings? Why do they promise things that they're going to do that they have no intentions of doing? Well, they do it because they aren't trained as well as you are. They aren't as strong as you are because of the time and effort that you put into your business and getting better. Well, so here's what I want to talk to you guys about today. I want to talk to you about this. If what you're doing doesn't work or isn't working, maybe say it that way. If what you're doing doesn't work or isn't working, getting better at what doesn't work doesn't work. So if what you're doing doesn't work, getting better at doing what doesn't work isn't going to work. Going and taking classes on what doesn't work doesn't work. Going and get a master's degree in what doesn't work doesn't work. If what you're doing doesn't work, getting better at what doesn't work isn't going to work. See, sometimes that's what happens is we will practice things, but we practice it wrong. See, hopefully by now you guys know I love baseball. I love watching baseball. I love coaching baseball. I love being involved in it. Well, one of the things that frustrates me, especially with kids, is that you will go out and I shouldn't. The difference, by the way, between kids and adults is about, the kids are this tall and the adults are this tall. That's about the only difference between kids and adults, really, in a lot of ways. Well, what happens though is that I've noticed is that they go out and they start to work on a skill and they continue to work on it and do it wrong. You've heard George talk about his son's swing. Well, I remember actually years ago, this probably 3 or 4 years ago, George was talking to my son and I about his son's swing. And what we talked about is he was dropping his hands. Well, it was interesting to hear George talk about his son's swing. He's still dropping his hands. Well, part of that is the amount of golf that he's playing, and I don't think he's willing to give that up. But if you practice wrong, doing it more and getting better at it is still not going to work. So here's the thing for you. What I want to talk about today with you guys is some handling of objections. I want to talk about objection handling for a little bit. And so here's the question. So I got a bunch of questions that I'm going to ask you guys is, what are the common objections that you are getting and why are you getting them? So I would like you to take a second and think about that is, what are the most common objections you're getting? And then ask yourself, why am I getting those objections? See, because that's where, when I say if what you're doing doesn't work, doing more and getting better at what doesn't work, ultimately that's what I'm talking about is the objections. If you are commonly getting the same objections over and over and over again, you have to stop and ask yourself that question of, why am I getting these objections? See, most likely the objections that you're getting, if you're seeing the same ones over and over again, if you are seeing the same objections over and over again, most likely it is because you're creating them. Something you are doing, something you are saying is what is creating the objection that people are giving you. So you have to stop and look back and say, okay, what are the common objections I'm getting? And why am I getting them? What am I saying or what am I doing that is creating that objection? Now, if you're not sure, then what you need to do is go record yourself and go back and review it afterwards to hear, okay, what did I say or what did I do right before they gave me that objection? Because most likely you are doing something to create that objection. So let me give you an example. If when you have somebody that says, we would like to, I'm trying to think of a good example one here. How about this? Let me do it this way. If you're saying something like this, and I actually see this more so on the asking for the appointment side than on the listing side, but here's what came to my mind. You wouldn't want to list with an agent like me, would you? See, if you ask that, you wouldn't want to list with an agent like me. What you're really asking, if you stop and look at that question, what you're asking them is why they're not going to list with you. And then all they have to do is give you a reason. In prospecting, the one that I hear people do that is, well, why don't we get together? Well, a lot of times what I will do, and some of you have seen me do this in the last week or so, but is that if I went around and asked you guys, and in fact, maybe I should ask you, is why don't you give me some money? So throw in the chat box, why, answer this question, why don't you give me some money? So Ruby's in the room with me and she said, what? She said she doesn't owe me any money. Yeah, Jesse says, I don't want to. Okay, great. Why don't you? Earn it yourself, April said. Thanks, April. Hey, Christine said, okay, good. I'm going to throw my Venmo in the chat box, Christine, so that you can send me some money. And Tim says that I already have some, and David says I have too much already. But now notice, though, outside of Christine, I didn't get any money from you guys. Instead, what I got was the answer to the question that I asked. Why don't you give me some money? And then you tell me the reason you're not going to give money. Now, let me give you some other things that create some objections that come up. How about this one? Is the house is not in great condition and you decide that it's not going to sell. See, that potentially could be an issue that comes up in your objection handling. Or how about this one? You go out and meet with the people and what you determine is, well, they're not very friendly people. And so then you decide again that they're going to be too difficult to work with. See, what happens is we go out and something in our presentation is creating this objection that you are getting. And it is because of something we're saying or something that we're doing that is creating that. All right, so here's the next question in terms of objection handling for you. Are you handling the objection when it comes up though? Or are you just passing it by and not doing anything about it? So do you handle the objection? Do you have an answer for the objection? See, ideally, you figure out what you're doing or saying that is creating the objection. But in the event that you haven't figured that out yet and you continue to get the same objection over and over again, are you coming up with a way that you can handle that? Are you figuring out what you need to say that will enable you to get to that next step? See, ultimately, if you can figure out, hey, here's the response that I need to give, that could be a great first step while you're trying to figure out what is it that you're doing that is creating it. But if you're getting the same thing over and over again, so let me give you another example. If what happens is somebody is saying to you, we want to think about it. If you're getting that over and over and over again, well, what are you doing about it? How are you handling that? Well, so let me give you an example of one that I like to use. If I'm on the phone making phone calls and somebody says to me, hey, well, I need to talk to my spouse. See, that's a great objection that they use as a way to get off of the phone with you is, well, I need to call and or I need to ask my wife or I need to ask my husband first. Okay, great. If you're getting that, how are you going to handle it? See, and for me, what I like to do is say this, well, let's just pencil it in. See, the idea of saying, let's just pencil it in is conveying the message to them of, it's written in pencil. We could go and erase it if we need to. That's a good way of overcoming that objection of, well, I need to talk to my spouse about it first. Now, hopefully, if you're on a listing presentation, the spouse is sitting there. You should have all the decision makers at the presentation. But when you're on the phone prospecting and they say, I need to talk to my spouse first, I'm not sure, then follow that up with, hey, well, let's do this. Let's just pencil it in. You can talk to your spouse, and then I'll give you a call to confirm before I come out. And generally, they will say okay to that. All right, good. So ultimately, think of it this way. When you get an objection, when people are giving you objections, in essence, all they're saying to you is, I still have a question in my mind that you haven't answered. See, an objection is basically a way of them saying, you just haven't answered my question yet. So if they say something, we like what you said, but somebody else will do it cheaper. See, what's the thing? What's the message they're telling you when they say, we like what you had to say, but we've got somebody else that will do it for cheaper? Now, I'm not expecting you necessarily to answer that in the chat box. You can if you want to. But ultimately, what they're telling you is you have not created value. See, so stop and look at the objections that you're getting to, and then ask yourself, why are they giving that objection? Because see, ultimately, when they say, well, somebody else will do it cheaper, what they're telling you is you have not created the value that for me to say yes just yet. Okay, how about this one? We want to think it over. See, now if you're on the phone, they will say, I need to talk to my spouse. When you're in person with them, when they say to you, well, let us think about it and then we'll give you a call the next day. What they're really saying to you is, we're not convinced you can get the job done. And so we want to think about it overnight to think about, are you the right person? See, ultimately, what I feel like they're telling you when they say we want to think about it is, we're not convinced you could get the job done. So what are you doing to show that and demonstrate that to them that you can do it? All right. So if you will just look at it as the objections that you get are typically just a question that they still have, which is another way of saying, I need to refine my presentation to answer those questions. And part of that could be even actually pre-qualifying them before you get out there so that you can make sure you know. See, part of the idea of pre-qualifying is about figuring out the motivation, but also what are the objections they're going to give me when I come out. Then I can tailor my presentation to make sure that I'm answering those questions. Now, the next piece on this that I wanted to hit on is the difference between objections and conditions. A condition is a statement of fact that you can do nothing about. So if they give you a condition, there's nothing you can do about it. Meaning, I want to buy a house, but I have bad credit. Now, some of you might say, well, no, you could go out and you could do a lease option, or you could go and do what's that? Owner carry, but I wasn't thinking that. What's the Home Partners of America? So you might say, well, we could go out and still do some things. So, and yes, I would agree. But can you do anything about them getting a loan if they have bad credit outside of those things? So I like the idea of thinking that way. Well, yeah, there's still some potential things, and I would totally agree. But just remember, when there is a condition, it's something we can't really do much about. So let's maybe even use this one then. I want to buy a house, which actually I've heard this quite a bit recently from agents, is they're prospecting, calling on some of the internet leads that people get, and they will say, yeah, I would love to buy a house. I got to find a job first. If I don't have a job, but yeah, I'll meet with you and go talk to you. See, that's a condition. We don't have a job. Even an owner carry is probably not going to happen if they have a job. So a condition is something you can't do anything about. And in that scenario, I would recommend put them into a database and stay in touch with them to see if they improve their credit, to see if they find a job. But an objection is something you can do something about. So if you will practice on that, and here's the good news. when it comes to objections, really, there's no new objections. I'll tell you that. In the 25 years that I have been doing this, there are no new objections. They may sound a little bit differently, but it's the same objection at the core. There's only a few of them. See, for 25 years, I have on prospecting calls heard people say, "Well, I need to talk to my spouse first, and then we could maybe meet." See, that hasn't changed. So, do you know how to answer them? And if you don't, stop and write down that objection. When you're prospecting, if you come across one you didn't know what to do, stop and write it down, and then figure out 2 or 3 ways that you could handle that to get around it to get to the next step. See, at the end of the day, guys, your job is about leadership. Your job is to lead people through a process to helping them accomplish what it is that they want. And the way that you're going to do that is through your communication and being able to say to them, "Hey, I totally understand you want to talk to your wife. If I were you, I would do that too. And I do that. So I'm not lying with that either. But if I were you, I would want to do that as well. Let's do this. Let's just pencil it in so that I can hold a spot for you. You can talk to your wife and I'll give you a follow-up call." All right. So here's the thing. Here's how I look at it. Whenever you get an objection, essentially you have 3 choices. You've got 3 choices of things you can do with an objection. So the first one is you can respond with any of these things that we've just been talking about, meaning if you write down the objection and then come up with 2 or 3 ways that you could answer that objection. So that's the first thing, is you can respond by using what you have practiced and role played. And again, if you guys are not doing that, you have got to be doing it. The World Series is going on right now, and I guarantee you that here in the next couple of hours, they're showing up. Well, actually, there's not a game today, but I guarantee you they're practicing today because they have a game tomorrow. And tomorrow they will show up before the game and practice. We should be doing that same thing. So, number one way to handle objection is respond with the answers you've practiced and role played. Number two, which is what a lot of people do, is that they actually just ignore what the people said and either leave, hang up the phone, or just go on to the next thing, hoping that it'll go away. And then number three, which again, I already said this is the ideal, is learn to handle it in the beginning while you figure out what you're doing in your presentation that is creating it so that you can overcome it as part of your presentation. And then just kind of the last thought for you guys on, and this isn't necessarily objection handling, but just in terms of your prospecting and your presentations, how enthusiastic are you? You should be excited about it. And when you're talking to people on the phone or you're on a presentation, tell them this is exciting. But you can't just say it. You got to say it like you mean it and be excited about it. See, the excitement level you bring to your prospecting, the excitement level you bring to a presentation is going to be contagious. People are attracted to energy. People will be attracted to your excitement and your enthusiasm and then want to work with you because of that. All right. So here's the question for you. What are you going to do differently as a result of what we've talked about? And if you want to throw it in the chat box, would love to see what you're going to do to get better based on this. But if not, if you don't want to share it, that's fine. But at least make a note of it, put it down, and get it in here that you're going to change and you're going to learn how to handle those objections. Too many times we just keep getting the same ones over and over and we never do anything about it. See, if what you're doing doesn't work, doing more and getting better at what doesn't work doesn't work. See, that's what my whole message is you've got to change your approach. See, if you're not getting the results you want out of your prospecting or your presentations, there's something in your approach that you need to change. And if you'll change your approach, you'll see different results. All right, guys, thanks for being with me. We'll close it up now with doing some closing affirmations, but I always appreciate you guys jumping on and being with me every time I do Morning Ascent. So thanks for being with me. Here we go.